Representative Dan Goldman, who can't stop carrying the administration's water. It's actually kind of amazing. He just keeps carrying buckets of it for Hunter and for Joe Biden. Well, Dan Goldman went on MSNBC and said this about the whole jury selection.
I also wanted to ask you just about the jury selection process. We all learned a lot. I became fascinated by the jury selection process today. Who knew? Did anything stick out to you about the number of people who pulled themselves out of it, or the length of the questionnaire? Anything surprising to you?
Well, it's always interesting when people self-select their own biases. You know, I've sat for jury duty as a former prosecutor, and I actually had a judge ask me, say, are you sure you can be fair and impartial? Which I found insulting. Of course I can be fair and impartial. Just because I'm a prosecutor does not mean that I can't look at the facts and the evidence like anybody else would. And so I wonder who is actually pulling him or herself out because of bias. Is it bias against Trump? Is it bias for Trump? It's very hard to tell. But I am glad that there will be an exhaustive voir dire of the jurors, because I do think that the sanctity of the jury pool is going to be vital in this trial. This is going to be a model for many Americans as to how criminal trials work, how our country's rule of law operates, and how no person, whether the former president or anyone else, is above the law. Donald Trump will be treated as any other defendant will be. All of his politicization and his partisanship and his campaigning outside of the courtroom will not be allowed in the courtroom. The only thing that will come in will be facts and evidence according to the rule of law, and these jurors will ultimately decide whether or not the evidence proves beyond a reasonable doubt that Donald Trump committed these crimes. That's what our great system is based on. And so now that the trial is actually beginning, as someone who did a number of trials, I'm excited for the American people to actually see how this process should work and why it should apply to Donald Trump and everyone else in this country, no matter their stature or power.
Oh, okay, I have to jump in. So poor Goldman. You know, they must give him the script. He just goes out there and he does it over and over and over again. But here's the thing. No, Donald Trump is not being treated the same as anybody else in this country. I mean, unless you want to say really and truly that's how bad it is. And that quite possibly is the situation. In which case, you know that Trump is going to be able to campaign all day long and say, look, it happened to me. It can happen to you. And this is how you get the middle of America, ladies and gentlemen, because middle America doesn't like seeing any of this. Not one single bit. Can you imagine if they went after Joe Biden like they're going after Donald Trump? And there's some there. But they're not doing it. They're not doing it because he's one of the team, right? He plays on their side. You get a guy like Trump who doesn't play on anyone's team other than hopefully America's. Right? That's what we want. That's what we need. And suddenly, persona non grata. So he's had it. He made that very clear. Let's listen to Donald Trump just sounding off at the inequity of this two-tiered system that is quite disfavorable to anyone the system doesn't like. Watch.
Thank you very much. This is a trial that should have never been brought. It's a trial that is being looked upon, looked at all over the world. They're looking at it and analyzing it. Every legal pundit, every legal scholar said this trial is a disgrace. We have a Trump-hating judge. We have a judge who shouldn't be on this case. He's totally conflicted. But this is a trial that should never happen. It should have been thrown out a long time ago. If you look at Jonathan Turley, Andy McCarthy, all great legal scholars, there's not one that we've been able to find that said this should be a trial. I was paying a lawyer and marked it down as a legal expense. Some accountant, I didn't know, marked it down as a legal expense. That's exactly what it was. And you get indicted over that? I should be right now in Pennsylvania, in Florida, in many other states, North Carolina, Georgia, campaigning. This is all coming from the Biden White House because the guy can't put two sentences together. He can't campaign. They're using this in order to try and win an election. And it's not working that way. It's working the opposite way. So check that out. Legal expense. It's called legal expense. That's what you're supposed to call it. Mr. Trump, you get indicted ever seen anything like it.
It's true. Nobody has. Nobody's seen anything like this. The viciousness by which they are going after him is atrocious.